Welcome to the home of Star Witch, where we explore witch lore and astrology for all cunning magical folk. I invite you to join me, your host Mikailah, with a cup of your favourite magical elixir and indulge in some tantalising spellcrafting and witchy conversations. It's my absolute pleasure today, with Libra season governed by Venus of beauty, aesthetics, values and principles, and of course creativity, to have one of our favoured podcast guest speakers on again with us, Michelle from Aleph Studio. For those of you that are joining us and this is the first time of meeting Michelle, she is a graphic designer, sigil artist and creative coach, supporting a range of clients to communicate their business via branding and identity design, and express their soul desires with commissioned sigil art, and to enhance their own creativity with a powerful and practical approach to magic, spelt with a K. So naturally drawn to the unseen and the imaginal, Michelle works with curious creatives, savvy business owners, and those seeking to develop their own creativity to gain an edge in work and life. And of course, for those of you that are part of the cohort for Magical Folk, you'll remember beautiful Michelle and her incredible episode on the art of sigils. And she will also be sharing in a separate episode, Chaos Magic. But here today, we are talking about magic and creativity. So, Michelle, this is a beautiful introduction as you are going through a metamorphosis and starting to incorporate some incredible workshops on magic and creativity. And you do have one coming up called The Creative Edge, which looks, it's very inspiring. And I'd love to find out, how did you dream this medicine in, and what is part of the metamorphosis of you moving deeper to actually offer magic and creativity out in the world? Because it's been a very personal journey and a reverent, honorable, sacred journey that you've kept within the inner sanctum for so long, if I can call it that.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you like to share, Michelle?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me again. Well, I mean, I am going through a little bit of a metamorphosis with business and what I want to be presenting into the world. But it's sort of a fractal of quite a larger metamorphosis, which I refer to as my creative journey, because I believe that I was not always a naturally creative person. And I mean, at school, I almost failed art. I mean, I don't know how that's even possible, but I wasn't really interested in art theory. I couldn't make or create with my hands. I wasn't a writer. Writing sort of bored me a little. And so there were all of these external expressions of creativity that I thought were sort of definitions of creativity. And I looked at all of those things and I was not that. And so I essentially gave up and just thought, well, creativity is often for those lucky, naturally gifted humans. That's not for me. But you know, there was something deep down that sort of I wanted that. I knew there was something there. I can't really put my finger on what that was. But, you know, I left it. I didn't really think too much about it. I went, you know, and did boring university degrees and got real jobs and worked in corporate and did a million things. But yeah, not creative. I had to do so many different fun things in my life. But one thing that I always was curious. And there is a deep, deep, deep desire within me to understand the world and to make sense of the world. And so in my travels of that, I came across Magick with a K. And yes, we will get to that. I came across Magick and I loved it. I loved the philosophy. I loved the process. I loved that finally there was a sort of a Western systemic way through the mystery that really appealed to me. As you know, I'm quite a rational person, despite being also very imaginative. But I realized, and that my life is sort of testament to this, that as I was going through like magical processes and learning more about certain philosophies, I got to a point where I was starting to be more creative. There were more expressions of creativity coming through in me. And it didn't look like art and it didn't look like design. What it did look like was coming up with cool ways to solve problems within my corporate job, or to make the team have more fun together, or do something else of value, like initiate some other sort of out of the ordinary type process, you know, within the team. And so my creativity started to come out in those ways. And I didn't know it at the time, but now, with the beautiful benefit of all of those years of hindsight, I get it now. And so eventually, you know, I got to the Saturn return, and that's where I became a graphic designer. No one in my friendship group expected that of me. My parents were like, "You're what? Where did this come from?" I'm sure a lot of my friends are just like, "You tripper? Like, we didn't know you were interested in any of this." But, you know, I was, and I just felt this big desire to go and do something that was like externally creative. So I went and did that. And from there, like the creativity just sort of spiraled out and became more and more. And along with that came more like fulfillment and a better way to approach life and move through life and take ownership of creating my life. And so I knew that the creative journey was running in parallel with my magical journey. And so at the beginning of this year, or late last year, it just landed. There's no coincidence there. I don't think that's something that just happened in your experience. I'm quite convinced that the magical journey, and maybe specifically the way that I went through it, impacted my creative journey like so much. And so I'm like, well, if that is a thing and if that can happen, then I can help others with that. And then I got thinking, well, I mean, if more people in the world have more outlets, more understanding of creativity, what it is, more empowerment to embrace their own creativity and to fulfill their creative potential, then, well, holy shit, we're in a new age, we're moving into a new era. There's inevitably going to be a whole lot of problems we need to solve. You know, like things like climate change. These big issues need big solutions. And I know that the solutions don't always come from within the system. Like they need a new way of thinking, a new perspective, something that's out of the ordinary to make it better. And so the thought of that just really excited me.
I love that, because as the astrologer within me, I'm just fascinated, because what you've so beautifully tied in with current times is Pluto moving into Aquarius finally at the end of November of this year, 2024. And of course, Aquarius is the vanguard. It's innovative new social ways of thinking and being. And, the planetary modern ruler of Aquarius is Uranus, which is the higher octave of thinking, of concepts, of ideas, of innovation and invention, and highly creative, newly awakening consciousness. So it's like Pluto destroys the old.
Yeah.
And the concepts and systems and structures for the new to come through. And even, Michelle, with you sharing around the maturation and the wake-up call in your first Saturn return, which for everybody goes through their first Saturn return around the ages of roughly 28 years old to 30 years old. I don't know how old you were, but quite a few guest speakers have shared that it was at this pivotal initiation point of their first Saturn return that a lot was awakened within them into a particular purpose and medicine to take out into the world.
Yes, 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 that feels absolutely right.
And mastery, because Saturn is around mastery and brings through this initiation passage, if you like, into purposeful existence and what that looks like out in the world, a maturation.
There you go. Was it all predestined? Possibly. But I'm feeling that this, that I just had a creative urge that I couldn't deny. And I know a lot of creative people speak to being sort of compelled to do something, like an idea just grabs a hold of them and they sort of don't have any, choice in the matter anymore. They've just got to be carried along by the river of the idea. And that's definitely what's happening now, because there was a little bit of kicking and screaming at the beginning. Like, this takes, for me personally, to present something that has been very personal and very quiet. Not even my friends know much about my interest in magic, and especially my long-term interest in magic. So it's hard to come out and talk about that, even though I'm sure everyone else is absolutely cool with it. But, there's an element of privacy with me. And so it is really uncomfortable, but it's also really exciting. And like I said, I don't know, I feel like I'm a passenger in bringing this out into the world at the moment. So let's just go with it.
I love that. And I'm so grateful that you are bringing this out into the world, especially at this time. Very interesting. It's like the world always needs more creative artisans and intuitives and wayseers and visionaries, and especially infused with magic. And can I ask, because it's very personal, spelling and words are spells and alphabets and sigils and signs and all of this. Are you open to share personally why you spell magic with a K?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And I think anyone that does choose to use that spelling does so for very deliberate reasons. And so I also have very deliberate reasons, obviously. And I guess most people would understand, I guess the shared sort of mainstream understanding of where that spelling came from was big granddaddy of modern occultism in the Western world, the controversial Aleister Crowley. And he came about and gave it that spelling in a time where stage magic was becoming a thing, and it was really quite popular. And so part of him wanted to distance those systems from that, essentially. And, he had his own very definite, defined approach to magic. And so by using the K now, for me, a little bit about, I guess, my magical lineage. Like, I am coming from more like occult systems, more Western magic, more modern Western magic from, late 18th century onwards in terms of modern. And so that's when Crowley was a big figure. And yeah, so it sort of speaks to where I've come from, what has informed my approach to magic. But it's sort of, I say that it's really informed my approach to magic, and it definitely has. It's the way that I've learned. But I think it's important to also say that by going through those processes and learning a lot about those systems, I also learned how to find my own way through them, because not everything resonated with me. And I'm sure people go through this with any sort of system. There can be a lot of dogma. It is quite a it's a very complex sort of system. It's very brainy. It's very mental. It's also quite masculine in a way. There's a lot of action and activeness. And systematized ritual and things like that. And so I think it's important, for anyone listening, perhaps if they're interested in my work, to know that even though that's informed and influenced where I am today with magic, I have definitely sort of formed my own little bag of philosophies and processes that are unique to my journey and specifically to creativity. So traditionalists in the occult magical world of the West would just they'd find this very distasteful, I believe, my approach. But it is what it is. And, in talking about creativity specifically, I don't know, I feel like I've got a really good approach to share.
I think so, because what I love about any craft or sacred calling is that there is, and I'm not saying this way is the only way, but I suppose I should only share personally, there's been something fundamental about doing the trainings, the learnings, the foundational underpinnings of years of study, but also embodying craft, whether that's witchcraft, occultism. And then once that foundation, like the roots of the tree, are really strong and anchored, then that's when you can express and explore your own unique essence. And I think it's more in the concept, if you've mastered this and if you're going on to teach or facilitate, not so much necessarily, and I'd be curious to find out your thoughts, because sometimes there's that edge of that training that, because it can be considered quite masculine, intellectually orientated, it can almost paralyze the intuitive, fluid, free-flowing, creative energy of just wanting to create for the magic of creation itself. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Like
Indeed.
overcoming the perfectionism of what something needs to look like, even the word creative, what that brings up for people, because we've been socially conditioned.
Yes, exactly. And
speak into dispelling the myth around the word creativity and what angst that may bring up for people, Michelle.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's a really big, I think there could be a lot of angst coming from a lot of different directions here. One, because, what I'm about to propose makes everyone realize that they almost have responsibility to exercise their creativity in the world.
And is this
passive?
Yes, sorry, is this to do with your up-and-coming workshop called The Creative Edge? Is this the inspiration for The Creative Edge?
Yeah.
What you're speaking into now?
Yeah, a little bit, exactly. Because, I feel like I am testament to the fact that someone has been held back and limited in a very big way, limited in expressing themselves creatively because they really thought it looked a certain way. And, it's the obvious expressions of creativity are the ones that we tend to take on as our definitions. So it is the fine arts, it is the painters and the writers and the sculptors and the musicians. And yes, that's creative, but it also takes a lot of refined technical skill to pull that off. The creativity sits at the back of it. It's not about the painting, it's the idea that's being painted. And so this is my approach to creativity. It's what's behind the expression of it. And so it doesn't matter if you've got no technical skill. It doesn't matter if you have a learning disability and can't write properly and put your thoughts cohesively on paper. Like, this is what I'm presenting, I hope, is something that's just really like accessible and inspiring and awakens the idea in people that creativity is much bigger than what we've been sort of, socially conditioned to believe it is. By stepping out of that definition, we're empowering ourselves to embrace more of our human nature, to embrace more of our personality, to take more ownership of life and expression. And I know that that helps in just making you a happier person. Like, at the very base of it, I know I speak sort of, in using a little bit of hyperbole, and I speak about big ideas about solving big problems and changing the world. That's my excited, idealistic tendencies coming out. But on a much smaller level, if you're embracing things like the ability to think a little bit differently about a subject, to practice divergent thinking, to practice things like fluidity of thought, fluidity of belief, if you are to use your imagination a little bit more in your daily life. This could be raising your kids. This could be just in your boring, mundane office job. Like, there is creativity and magic that you can bring. And for someone that the mundane just feels so heavy and soul crushing, the more people that are expressing the creativity that lies behind what we think is creative, I just can't help but think that's going to make the world a little bit better on the ground, like, every day. It's going to make you happier. So I don't see why you wouldn't want to do this.
That's right. And it's a beautiful metaphor, like drawing outside the lines, giving yourself permission to draw outside the lines. Hey, whatever that symbolizes, whatever those lines symbolize in your own life.
Yeah, exactly. I just find it to be very empowering. Very empowering. And I also know that, putting an idea out there like that, I know that there are a lot of sort of, creatively driven people that also have too much of that maybe ideas type energy. And like, I've also got ways for them to bring that into focus and to direct that. So even though, I'm trying to empower people to tap into that, it's not only just opening the floodgates and having a whole lot of ideas buzzing around in the ether or around in your mind. Like, there are also ways that you can bring them and ground them.
I love that, because with the essence of magic, and when you first start to explore magic and occultism or rituals, or, the intention and the energy does need to be harnessed in a way to bring it into a sacred temenos, and that is like the creative cauldron that offers form to the magic that's being created. And like, even having that magic streamlined with intention is part of the process as well. So people are coming in from different angles and aspects with different intentions. So if they join your series of workshops that you're going to be offering, with the Creative Edge being the first offering, that's correct, isn't it? So what can people expect? What's in the Creative Edge as it is at the moment, at this point in time?
Yeah, exactly. Because as people are booking in, I'm actually feeling the energy shift ever so slightly, and I'm still making tweaks to it to make it right for the people that are coming. That's really important to me. I don't just want to sit there and talk at people. If I think that they already know a lot of the stuff, I'll happily sort of tweak it. But in essence, the Creative Edge is a workshop that's designed to set the scene for future workshops. It allows you to learn a little bit about me and what my background is with magic. I think that's really important to know, that there's a lot of foundational, there are a lot of deep roots here. I'm not just making this up and playing around with ideas. I take it quite seriously. And so there's setting that scene, but there's also starting to introduce the idea, like, one, let's debunk traditional notions of creativity and why. But two, I start to introduce, my system for, it's not really a system, it sort of is a system, let's call it a system. What I've realized is there are these key sort of pillars where magic and creativity overlap and influence each other. And so I start to present what they are, what those pillars are, what the overlaps are, and why they matter. And already just in that alone, I think that really starts to open up possibilities for people, opens up possibilities that things can potentially change a little bit for them and get better. And we also do some ritual processes. I don't want to use the word ritual, yes, because it is introductory, this workshop, and I don't want to just dive everyone straight into rituals. There's a lot of like feeling out of what's appropriate for people, so we don't like dive right into the magic, but we do dive right into magical principles and magical philosophy, and we do a couple of interactive exercises that start to give a look into what future workshops are going to look like in a practical sense. Yeah.
I love that you carry this strong sense. I don't know if responsibility is the right word, but as a magic woman, a magic weaver, you have that sense of diligence and duty of care to not just bring people in and dive them straight down into the depths, because there's almost like at times people can have an over attachment or desire that it needs to be incredibly cathartic.
Yes, exactly.
And then you're dealing with the aftermath.
Yeah.
So is this a good point to speak into the intersectionality of magic, creativity, and commodification? Because I know out there in social media land, there's also this edge around commodifying sacred gifts. Now, I've got two different views, personal views. I can walk on both sides of this, but I prefer to take the middle path.
Yeah.
Personally, I think it's incredible that creatives, intuitives, artisans can actually make a living from their craft, adapting themselves in a way that doesn't dishonor their service. At the same time, when you weave magic or the craft into this complexity, there's another edge there, isn't there? How do you feel about this, Michelle? Because you're embarking in this process as well, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. And I've given it a lot of thought, so much thought, and we can literally spend all day talking about this topic. Like I would happily
Same.
speak to different points in this topic of conversation. There's so much there. I think the first thing that sort of feels, the most alive in response to that is I sort of look at my own approach to magic, right? So we can see magic as something sacred and spiritual, or we can also see it as something that is very grounded and matter of fact and demystified. And depending on your lens, like it looks the same, but you just use different language. But what I'm sort of working through here is, I don't know, the collective industry, spiritual industry, let's call it, may have, they see it through more of the spiritual sacred lens. But what if seeing it that way isn't the only valid way. And so does it make it less sacred by me sharing content that's more accessible and more perhaps even along the lines of psychology and neuroscience? Like if I use different terminology, the gifts that I'm sharing are the same. No one's going to look at the psychology and neuroscience element of that and say, oh no, you shouldn't be commodifying that. That's not sacred to them, but it's the same thing. And so a big part of me sort of steps out of the morality of it, because I know my approach. And I know that most people in the modern world would probably, when they get to know me more and see my approach and hear me explain it, realize that, oh, I mean, I've been saying to people that you can be an atheist and still get a lot out of magic and still believe in magic and still believe in magical forces and magical principles and have them work in your life. Like it doesn't actually have to be a sacred spiritual path. It doesn't at all. And so, you know, there's sort of that element in it. Perhaps it's a little bit different because I see magic as learning to make your gifts a little bit better or more pronounced, and maybe that's the difference between sort of witchcraft and magic, you know. So it could be off on a little tangent there, but I guess it depends on how you're looking at it. But also too, I mean, we live in a capitalist society. Like, do we not all deserve to make a living? And if I have natural intuitive gifts, why is that different from someone that might have a gift for teaching in a certain way in a classroom? Like, I just don't really see that there's that strong differentiation between those two situations. And so for me, like, the morality of it is not really part of it.
I love that. So your morality sense of not superiority, but or hierarchical energy, it's a different lens, and it depends on how individuals enter the space and what lens. It's very much a transpersonal lens, actually, what you've described, of unconditional positive regard, that when someone comes into your space, it's about their world and what they're bringing in from their different backgrounds and upbringings and social conditionings or spiritual philosophies, say.
Yeah.
And then,
exactly.
you know, that beautiful Rumi quote, there's beyond right and wrong, there's a field out there, I will meet you there. Is that, you know, like,
yes.
is that sort of the essence of what you're conveying, Michelle?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a feeling that it's very human lenses that we're looking at these sorts of special gifts through, and I don't see it that way. I don't see that those sorts of gifts that deal with the unseen are any more special than gifts that we can see. They're just more mysterious, and so we might project specialness on it because we can't see it, and it's a little bit rare, and it's been pushed out of society a little bit. So yeah, perhaps that's why.
So you're really calling it back for all cunning magical folk, aren't you?
Well, yeah, it's important to me to make the magic accessible. And I guess it speaks to me as well, because part of me can be deeply spiritual, but you know what? I also have atheistic tendencies, to be perfectly honest. And I know that I can make my way through magic as a philosophy without any spirituality attached to it. And it's still super valuable and makes my life so much better.
As an energy force?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Fascinating.
To me, it is what it is. It doesn't have to be seen as like, oh, so mystical and so special and so sacred. It's there for everyone. Like, it's not just there for the special few. Sometimes I think, I mean, that's how I feel about it currently. My mind shifts. It depends on what day you ask me, to be perfectly honest.
I know, and I understand
that's that fluidity of thought I'm talking about.
Yes, and your experiences is what you experience as well in life, and how truth changes and morphs. And But I love this because this is actually the heart-centered approach with your intentional aspect of creating this workshop and these series of workshops, is that it's accessible to people from all different backgrounds. Is that right? And
definitely.
how to weave magic and debunk creativity and what that means for the special chosen few.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, this is probably like an edge for the outwardly creative types. Like the artists would just look at this in a different light, I think, and they're like, oh no, not everyone's an artist. And maybe not everyone's an artist, but everyone's a creator. Everyone can create. Everyone can get better at creative expression. Everyone can get better at being an artist. Everyone can get better at being a writer if you just dedicate the time to it. If you dedicate your time to the technical skill, anyone can. That's why I don't see creativity necessarily as those things. It's just that there's some creativity that you're tapping into. It's just that you've devised and crafted a method of which to express it into the world. But there's an infinite number of methods to express what's behind the technical skill.
Oh, and so that is a prominent aspect of the creative edge, is that you're going to be bringing in some methodology to support people to really access from the ethers, so say, for example, the creative ethers, and then drawing it down and manifesting it into reality so that it's grounded and focused. Very much the magician, isn't it?
It very much is. Exactly. That would be my most prominent archetype. I've been thinking about it recently. And yeah, that's sort of it on a meta sort of level. Because what people will see in the creative edge is they're going to see me pointing out all of the different things that affect creativity and our ability to be creative. And then I'm going to present what those overlaps are in terms of magic. So this is what it looks like in terms of creativity and ideas formation. But when you do this thing in magic, in this magical system, that's also what that is doing. So it could be just, imagination exercises. It could be focus and intention exercises. It could be belief busting exercises and cultivating that fluidity of thought to put yourself behind different lenses and look at things through different perspectives. And there are magical processes and magical systems to help do all of that sort of thing. It's like I was saying to my husband recently, it's like you're going to the gym, but you don't want to go to the gym because that's really boring and hard. So you're going to a dance class. And you're going to a dance class and you're going to get fit. You're going to get fit, but it's also really fun and not really about the fitness. So you're going to get better at, going to get fit, going to get better at dancing. Yeah, this is how I'm seeing this. It's like a brain exercise specifically designed for creativity, and we're just looking at it through a magical lens. And just by looking at any subject through a magical lens, already you are opening up so many possibilities.
And this would be supporting people who have their own businesses or people that are just curious to explore this for themselves. It doesn't really matter what background they come from, does it? By the sounds of it, it's open to every beautiful creature that wishes to explore these themes.
Yeah, it absolutely is, which makes it really difficult to market, I have to say.
That's okay. You're doing a brilliant job. And are the workshops, people can contact you through your website to book in, Michelle, and you'll be offering them as a series of workshops. So I will put the link in, but it's Aleph, ALEPH.studio/the creative edge. But people can find you on Instagram.
Yes.
And Aleph Studio, so Aleph.studio.
Yes, find me on
Web
Instagram. I'm doing most of my I'm doing most of my sort of marketing for it on Instagram, so that's where the links and everything will be if you just want to make it easy. But if you went to the website, which is just aleph.studio, you can sign up to the mailing list and you'll be notified of all of the future workshops that come out, because I don't have locked in dates for those yet. It's a little bit mystical and I'm feeling into it, so I'm just going to like put them out when I feel the timing is right. So it's a little bit of a mystery tour.
I love that. And so for the beautiful listeners that are catching this, you do have your first inaugural launch, I should say, the 1st of October, 2024.
Yeah, 2nd of October. Yeah, that's a Wednesday night.
Yes.
It'll be at 6:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time. Might be daylight savings by the time that kicks in, but I'm in Queensland, so it'll be standard time. And yeah, it should be interesting. I'm trying to make it fun, even though it is a little bit of a nerd fest in terms of systems and philosophies. But I'm trying to balance it out with some actual fun interactive stuff as well. So
this is the first initial one in the series anyway, so it's a good foundational one to join, an introductory one. And of course, you'll be offering this again. So if people are listening to this podcast and it's after the 2nd of October, please contact Michelle, because she's running these very interesting workshops with everything we've just spoken into around magic, and creativity. And thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Are there any last magical meanderings that you'd like to share before we finish for the morning?
No, I can't think of any. But what I would just like to impart on people as we say goodbye is the world needs you. Even if it's just in really small, seemingly insignificant ways, the world needs you to be tapping into powerful forces that you didn't know were there, or maybe you did know that they were there. It's a responsibility and potentially an existential imperative for the collective for us to own our imagination, not to outsource our imagination, especially with AI coming into the creative realm. I can see creativity being devalued in future because it's such a quick, I would hate to see humanity begin in any way to pass off their own imagination and the power of the imagination, because we go on a whole other rant about the power of the imagination and how it actually creates reality. But I implore you to hold on to that, because to me, we talk about sacred and what's not, what's sacred and what's not. And our imagination is actually really sacred. So I'd just like to remind people of that. That's something that I feel very strongly.
That's a brilliant call, Michelle, especially with what is transgression. The imaginal realm is one of our sacred gifts that needs to be nurtured and nourished with the ever-changing landscape out there with progression of technology. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here today and speaking into magic and creativity.
Thank you so much for having me.
As always, we're so grateful, and thank you to the beautiful listeners that have shared this space with us today as well. Please jump online and check out Michelle's amazing, amazing offerings. Thank you, all you magical, cunning folk, for joining me here and sharing our precious time together. If you'd like to subscribe to my channel for magical folk, and follow me on any platform where it is that you have discovered me. See you in the wild magical woods.